What is stopping you from killing yourself? Being harder to kill than I planned. Curiosity. I just got to see what could possibly happen next. The fact that it would probably start a suicide chain reaction in my family. My mom and our dog, and I try to keep reminding myself that it probably can't really become a lot worse unless something truly unexpected happens, like my mom dying or something, and things can probably only improve from where I'm now. Also, death terrifies me, to be honest. My family has been through enough already. I couldn't put them through having to deal with my suicide. I always told myself that one day I'd be glad I didn't, and I am. What stopped me in my tracks last time was the thought of what it would put my best friend through. I couldn't face it, couldn't bear the sadness I know that she'd feel. Just the mere idea of it made me take a minute to consider what I was doing. The fear that I would fail and just make my life worse. That I would botch my attempt and survive it and end up in a psych ward, making myself even more miserable than I'm now. My wife. We currently don't live together because we can't afford it at the moment. Whole bunch of other reasons go into it, but right now, I'm miserable and stuck renting a room in a basement. I get to see her every once in a while and eventually we will live together. It's gotten bad enough that I broke down crying in Walmart yesterday. The off chance that one of my 2 kids will need me one day. My dog. And finally finding an antidepressant that works for me. I got my dog after a suicide attempt that landed me in the hospital for a while. I was beyond depressed, abusing alcohol, and I just had a thought that I wanted a dog. I was scrolling through adoption ads, going into random pet stores, checking all the rescues, and then one day I saw my pup in a little cage with some other dogs. He wasn't even 3 pounds and he didn't give a fuck that anyone was looking at him. He was just chilling and doing his own thing. All the other puppies were jumping around. I held him in my arms and I just had this warm feeling fill my entire chest. It was the first time I'd really felt like that in a long time. It's been 2.5 years now, and I'm not depressed anymore. My life has done a complete 180 and my dog is currently sitting here grabbing my hand like, excuse me, you're welcome, now pet me. Anytime the thought that life isn't going my way comes, I look at him and remember that everything has to be okay, BC he needs me. So I agree. The world's best antidepressant. The fact I don't actually want to. I'm stuck in a rut and it feels like the best option. But it's not what I want. I have recently found pretty decent friends. My mom would be sad. Not giving my parents the happiness, pride and everything in the world that they absolutely deserve. The feeling that I never lived to begin with, never fell in love, not even a crush as my social anxiety forbade it. If I end it all now, my father who's a heart patient will collapse, and so will my mother, and I can never let that happen. Even if my life is fucked, my mental health is suffering and I know every day is a battle and every day I'm losing. The hope that someday I won't want to. I've seen firsthand what suicide does to friends and families. It's like detonating a bomb in people's lives. Some never truly recover. I might hate myself and struggle with suicidal thoughts, but I don't hate anyone else enough to put them through that sort of pain. Plus I have a son now. I live for him. Since some people are commenting about this, no, I'm not calling people who kill themselves selfish. I struggle with suicidal thoughts, and the reality that my death would devastate people in my life doesn't just make those feelings disappear or invalidate my reasons for feeling them. In the words of Carl Sagan, better by far to embrace a hard truth than a reassuring fable. The truth is that those who suicide are looking to end the pain. It's also the truth that people in that person's life will likely be deeply and forever traumatized by their suicide, regardless of their motivations. Both these points can be, and are nearly always, true. I'm not actually suicidal, I'm just kinda hopelessly anxious and lonely. I got shit to do. I witnessed the aftermath of a good friend trying to kill herself. I was 13 and it was absolutely traumatizing. I realized that the easiest way for the world to destroy you is by having you destroy yourself. So I decided staying alive and becoming the best person I could be would be the most effective middle finger to this. It's still a long and hard K, but thanks to therapy and some good luck, I'm finally getting out of a life cycle of OCD and depression and towards a happier life. Curiosity in that it doesn't matter. I right now have almost no hope of ever being happy, and 2 to 3 hours a day are nothing but physical pain, and I might just give up the second that it becomes worse. But it doesn't matter. The second you die, I'm sure it's like you've never been and all the pain is gone. Might as well see if anything positive happens, as in the end, it won't change anything. The end is certain, but the path until then isn't. My life kept getting objectively worse, yet somehow I mostly feel as bad as I always did. If I can endure and find little moments of happiness in situation that I couldn't imagine to survive willingly, then I know that I can also be happier when many things might improve. Looked at objectively, my life is pretty okay compared to so many others. Depression is an affliction, not a moral failing. No need to feel guilty about suffering from it. I didn't chop my foot off when I sprained my ankle, so no need to overreact to a common mental health malady either. Remember your Hemingway from high school. The world breaks everybody, so no need to feel singled out. Remember your Aeschylus from high school. So many people have emerged out the other side of depression. Maybe not entirely cured, but able to function and even appreciate life again. When you're going through a slough, you've got to remember that it has a beginning, a middle and an end. My cat. I actually have two. One ended up with me and the other I picked out after my og kitty died, RIP little girl. While I love and care dearly for both my boys, it's the replacement I picked up from the shelter that keeps me going. He's the reason I don't call into work more often and what makes me excited to get home from work and vacations. Actual vacations. I feel like I didn't experience my first real vacation until I was 30, and it was a lifesaver. Literally, I was fairly certain if I didn't go somewhere for my 30th birthday I was just going to drink myself to death at home. Ended up going out west. First vacation alone. Saw mountains for the first time and met some amazing locals. It really rejuvenated my faith in humanity and reminded me that people can be genuine and truly nice and not need a reason for it. It also made me realize just how much of the US I haven't seen and need to see. So now I'm working on seeing all the national parks in my lifetime. First one is coming up in May and I'm so stoked. I must outlive my enemies. I don't want to cause a hassle to my family. I don't think my mother could take something like this right now. I also haven't decided on a good enough method yet. Hills and cutting don't work well enough, and hanging myself or jumping from somewhere scare me too much. The fear of surviving a suicide attempt and remaining scarred from it in some way is greater than the fear of death. I also can't help but wonder whether all the stories about hell are true and whether there is actually a greater pain in death than there is in life. I like to think that death comes with nothingness because the prospect of eternity scares me. For as long as I'm alive, I can live with the consciousness of being finite. What terrifies me is the possibility that I may not be, and honestly I want to procrastinate knowing about that. I don't really have an suicidal ideation anymore, but when I did have it pretty severely I bought a better fish. I knew no one would take care of him if I died, so I had to be there for him. I put a lot of effort into caring for him, researching how to maintain his tank and what conditions he needed to be kept in. Eventually he did die, and I was devastated, but by then my mental health had improved, and I could deal with it. Not knowing what happens after death. I honestly have no idea, but clearly it's something. Maybe I have a tiny bit of hope for the future left. I was depressed and suicidal for a number of years from about 17, when the depression started, 19 when suicidal thoughts started. To deal with this, I self-medicated with drugs and became addicted. That of course didn't make things any better. My life got more and more shit up until I was completely disregarding my own safety and would take lethal combinations of drugs because I enjoyed it more and because I thought, well, if I don't wake up then so be it. This culminated in a month of binges, and there were many nights when I would take heroin or fentanyl and Xanax and would wish this would be the night it pushed me into death's door. It didn't happen, thankfully. So the final pseudo attempt was one night when my roommate got robbed and he blamed me because I was there, as were his parents who he didn't blame, and it was our dealer and his sister. The sister robbed us by asking to use the bathroom, and of course I thought it'd be weird if I went upstairs with her and waited for her to be done, and our dealer was getting me pretty high. Hey, you want another line? I couldn't say no to free drugs. Well, my roommate came home the next morning and discovered he had been robbed. Also worth noting, the only reason he robbed my roommate was to teach him a lesson and wasn't intending to keep any of it. I know it sounds far-fetched, but he gave everything back in the following days. Our dealer was always good to us and was a friend, I guess. He dropped a gram of dope in my buddy's car and asked if he left it there and told him he could keep half if he found it. Of course my roommate found it and we just did all of it and lied. And he told someone like an idiot, and the information got back to the dealer. So my roommate freaked out on me and told me to get the fuck out. Time to move out. And now he says I owe him like $2,000, despite him getting everything back that was taken. So that night I was talking to my ex. We have remained very close friends and even lived together for a few months after we broke up. She was a force for good in my life, and why she wanted to be around me when I would nod out while watching TV quite frequently, I have no idea. Anyway, this particular night I was taking large doses of both drugs and was hoping for death. I was texting her about my depression and suicidal thoughts and mentioned what I was up to, and she did something that made me so angry at the time, but I'm now eternally grateful for. She texted or messaged my mother and told her what was going on with me. The next morning I woke up to panicked calls from my parents demanding I move out and in with one of them. I was furious at her. She betrayed my trust, but she also likely saved my life. If I had stayed on that path I might have already died, or best case scenario ended up in prison. I mean, I got in like 6 vehicle accidents in a 6-month span of time, and I wasn't even on the heroin yet. That was all from pills like opiates and benzos. I kept my parents from coming to my place and moving me out immediately. I put them off for a couple weeks by agreeing to move in with them on a particular weekend. I needed to give my job a 2-week notice after all. So in this span of time I used a few more times and stopped using about a week before moving in with them. I didn't want to go through withdrawals in front of them, so I moved in with my mom and her husband. It wasn't ideal. I missed my lifestyle, but was happy to not be living with my toxic former roommate. He had real mental problems that were exacerbated by drug use. I highly suspect he was bipolar. I mean, he would get home from work and like yell in happiness and just be a cheery fuck. Then about an hour after that he would be yelling at everyone in the house and telling me how lazy and pathetic I am. About 2 hours after that he would be talking to me like nothing happened and offering me a line or two. He would also get violent at times. Toward myself, toward others especially, and even toward his own parents. After moving in with my parents I started going to a small group therapy program. After completing that, it was time to look for work and get a car and start being a productive member of society. So I did. I would still battle with deep depression. The only difference was I was sober and in a better environment, but so much more alone in some ways. I worked nights, so I rarely saw my parents. I didn't have a social life because more often than not we had to work 6 days a week. When I started there, and probably half the time I worked there, we would work on average 60 hours a week. Some weeks 70 hours. Some great weeks might only be 50. Working that much took a huge toll on my mental health as well. My boss was shit. He was a high school graduate who just worked at this factory long enough to move up to the department supervisor. He was incredibly unappreciative and had no idea how to motivate his team and to increase morale. It's like he never read a study in his life. On a couple occasions I tried to explain studies that would come out citing that workers with low morale often withhold effort in a way to quietly sabotage the company's profits. And that's what most people did there. Working all those hours mixed with not having a social life and feeling incredibly underappreciated and undervalued and tremendously lonely. I started fantasizing about suicide more and more. I always say though that I'd never commit suicide now, because that means the last few years have been pointless and I suffered so much more for nothing. If I were going to do it, I'd have done it a long time ago. Plus my mother would be devastated. I couldn't do that to my family. That's just selfish and lazy. Instead I should work hard to create a life worth living. So that's where I'm at now. I have a new job. Better,